Okay, so we've caught yesterday your presentation. It was really nice, and one aspect we really liked was like how you presented it. Like you took an alphabet, entire alphabet, and made each slide correspond with a letter, like A, B, C. So we thought that it would be quite a unique twist that we make an interview like that too, like A, B, C, and every question corresponds with a letter. So the first one, A. Are you interested only in indie games, or are you planning to do something bigger eventually?
So I'm not just interested in indie games. I'm actually a huge fan of the AAA scene. I'm a fan of mobile games as well. I kind of like video games just in general, and I try to keep my palette very wide with what I'm playing. So currently, I just finished Starlink on the Switch. I'm playing Red Dead Redemption. It's been an interesting game to play. And I just finished Return of Obra Dinn, which is very much an indie game. And on my phone, I'm playing Vlambeer. So I kind of try and play everything. As for what I like to make, I think I like the tempo of making indie games. It's a little bit shorter, a little faster turnaround, so I feel I can be a bit more creative. But maybe in the future I'll work on something bigger. Just for now, getting more projects in sounds more interesting than getting bigger projects in.
Okay. So B, being able to travel all around the world, speaking to different audiences, what surprises you the most?
I think the thing that surprises me the most is just no matter where I go, how much passion developers have for their work.
Yeah.
It's because you kind of feel like, if circumstances aren't as good, if the internet is bad, if computers are slow, that people might be less excited about making games. But no, it's the opposite. They're more excited about making games because otherwise they wouldn't be doing it. So it's just like the pure love for making stuff that's everywhere. And it keeps surprising me over and over just how passionate people are.
Okay. C. Could you name an example of a perfect indie game?
Not of a perfect one. I can name you some ones that are very close to it. Spelunky is close to perfect. It's really good at what it does, but also Papers, Please is almost perfect at what it does. I personally think Fez is very close to being perfect to what it is. I know some of the older ones like Cave Story, Warning Forever, games like that are a little, they're usually very compact.
Yeah.
They do one thing really well, like Sword and Sorcery, which was on iOS, I think originally. It's just a very small idea executed very well, and that's what indie is kind of great at.
Okay. D. Do you spend a lot of time developing one game?
So we try to make it short. On some of our previous games, it's been between 6 months to 3 years, right? But for our future projects, we're looking to keep it shorter. So I think we try to spend 6 months to a year on a game and not more than that, because otherwise you get to the point where it kind of gets boring to work on. It's still exciting, but it's exciting in a different way. And I think I like the excitement of something new. That you're just trying to explore. I like that more than the excitement of figuring every aspect of something out. That's good for other studios. We'll just make the cool stuff that nobody else is making, and then other people can do different stuff with that.
Okay. E. Even if you had a very limited budget, is it still worth making a game?
Yeah, even if I had no money, I would still be making games. I mean, I've been making games since I was 6. I never earned money making games until 6, 7, 8 years ago, but I've been making games all my life. I have to make games. It's just part of who I am. If I can't program, if I can't think about games, I'm not happy. So money or no money, I would do that. If I had no money, sure, I'd have to do a day job, but then when I got home, I would probably make games.
Okay. F. First indie game you ever played?
Ooh, first indie game I ever played. That would probably be one of my co-founders' games. And it was this small game. I think it was called Coptra. It was a small helicopter fighting game. It was kind of weird. But yeah, I played a lot of Cactus Squid's work, the guy who ended up doing Hotline Miami, together with Dennis Widin at Denaton. I remember Super Meat Boy, being pretty early, and Cave Story. Obviously, Cave Story was one of the... Cave Story might have been the first indie game that I looked at and went like, wow, okay, so this is... We can make this quality of games, even if we're a tiny team. And I think Cave Story remains super inspiring to so many developers.
Okay. G. Game or games that inspire you?
There's many. There's so many. I think every game I play is sort of a piece of history that inspires me, whether it's a good game or a bad game. And some great games inspire me. Metal Gear Solid, the original one, is a huge inspiration. StarCraft remains a huge inspiration for all of the modding tools, right? For all of the editors. But then also, more niche games like ActRacer for the Super Nintendo was one of my favorite games. Transport Tycoon back in the days was a huge inspiration. And then obviously there's the more modern inspirations, the games that you play now and go like, wow, okay, not what I expected. Or just very interesting. Return of Obra Dinn, which I just finished, really changed my look on games, really changed how I look at games. And sometimes it's a mobile game, sometimes it's like this tiny little game that just something very interesting, and you look at it, you go like, okay, yeah, right, okay, that's cool. I didn't realize you could do that. And I think games that do that, games like Downwell, games like Action Fist Samurai Gun, where you just play them and you go like, okay, for me as a game developer, that's exciting. So, okay.
H. How you decide on what game you will be making next?
So the way we do that at Vlambeer is we're two people, and my co-founder JW, he's a very chaotic, creative mind. So he comes up with a lot of game ideas, and a lot of them are bad. And then the two of us sit down and try to figure out which ones are good, right? Which ones are worth working on, and then. For a week or two, we just work on the ones that are interesting, and then after 2 weeks, if we still feel they're fun to work on, not fun to play, right? Yeah. Fun to work on, then we might decide to make a game. And part of how you decide to make a game is sort of like, it's kind of magic. Like there's no good way of deciding, because you can say like, well, what games are good in the market? But by the time you're done, the market is going to be very different, right? You can say like, okay, what game fits our brand? But maybe you want to change your brand. Like there's a lot of questions you can ask. In the end, I think the most important one is this going to be fun to work on? Because you're going to be stuck with it for a year, maybe 3 years. That's your life for the next few years. So for us, is it fun to work on? That's how we decide.
Okay. So inside indie game developers studio, what one item or thing absolutely must be there in the studio?
What one item do you really need in an indie game studio? Yeah. Well, I mean, for me, obviously computers, that's kind of useful. Yeah. For me, I think what you need is a place where you can sit down and just chat to each other. I think that's more important than anything else. And a lot of indie studios are remote. Vlambeer is mostly remote. But when me and JW are in the same room, we try to find a comfortable place to sit and sort of like talk. I think paper and drawing tools are very helpful because it's just a very easy way of communicating. And personally, I can't work without music, so good sound. Okay. Those three things, and I'm a happy dev.
Okay. Jay, so judging, how a developer should react to someone judging their game?
So I think the right way of responding to any feedback is to accept it. No matter how positive or negative the feedback is. A lot of developers are very shy about compliments. So if you say like, this is really good, they're like, oh, it's no big deal. And it's like, no, this person just told you it's good. Yeah. Just accept it. But also if somebody says like, well, this game is really bad, you just have to accept that. Not everybody will like your game. I think the most valuable thing as a developer is to find the truth in feedback. Because a lot of people say like, well, this boss is too hard. But it doesn't mean the boss is too hard. It might mean you don't have enough health, or there was not enough ammo, or the arena is too small. So you kind of listen to what people are saying, but you don't necessarily do what they say. You as a designer have to find out what they're trying to say, and then you base your solutions, your changes on that. I think the best advice I've ever gotten with feedback is don't listen to people's solutions, listen to the problem. Okay. So if they say like this boss is too strong, you could say, well, I'm going to make the health lower. Yeah. That's probably not the right solution. That's the solution if somebody is looking from the outside. You as a developer you know everything about your game. Yeah. Find the problem, fix that.
Okay. Okay. Kind comments in your game profile, good thing or no?
Kind comments, yeah, no. I mean, the power that user reviews have nowadays is huge. And the same thing goes for YouTube, it goes for comments, it goes for Twitch. Like, so much of game development has gotten really complicated in terms of reach and in terms of discoverability. And a large part of how platforms like Steam and PlayStation and Microsoft are solving that is by giving the user the power to say what's popular, what's important, what's big right now. So any vote, any 5-star review, any thumbs up, any positive response, any review that's good helps developers like that make more games like that. So any kind comment, you know, people work years of their life on this. They spend days that, you know, most people would spend on, you know, going outside or like hanging out with friends. They spend some of those days on making games. And even though we have to get better at the work-life balance thing, it's still true that for a lot of developers, this is their life for a while. So letting people know that that was appreciated, even just one nice comment will make somebody's day. Like, I promise you, as a developer, our games have been very popular, we've been very thankful, but still one nice comment can really change my day. It can really make me go from being kind of down about my work to just being like, let's go, let's make some games. So okay. Yes, please leave kind comments.
Okay. Living out of a game development, possible or not?
Possible, clearly yes, because some people are doing it. It's not the normal situation. If you're a game developer, if you want to be a game developer, really think of it as more like photography or being a music band. Most people who do photography don't earn money. Most people who make music don't earn money. And since a few years, most people who make games, they don't earn money either. So if you're going to go into game development, do it as a hobby. And then if you make something that you think is worth selling, then start thinking about selling. But don't quit your day job. Don't sacrifice your life. Don't mortgage your house. Don't do any of those things. First, get something that you are pretty sure will sell. And if not just you, but also the people around you, and some strangers maybe at an expo, if those people believe it too, then try going all in. Because at that point, you know, if you have the opportunity of making rent, of paying for life, making games, and that's something you want, it's incredible. It's stressful, but it's incredible. But the only thing that's more stressful than that, the thing that can really kill your dreams of being a game developer, that can really destroy your pleasure in making games, is doing it while having to earn money. So don't risk it.
Okay. So we're halfway through. Yeah. Congratulations on that. But going ahead. So, motivation to make a new game. Where to search for it?
I think the thing with motivation and inspiration is that you don't search for it, it kind of finds you. And the way, that sounds very vague, but honestly, I think the right response to inspiration and motivation is you search not for it, you just search for everything. You go to places, you read books, you watch movies, you listen to music, you talk to interesting people, you go to theater or go travel or, you know, take a long walk or like motivation and inspiration never come from where you expect. It doesn't come from like searching for it. Like it's the same thing where if you always have your best ideas when you're like falling asleep or you're like in the shower or you're like in the middle of something important and you're like, and you have to like write it down, but you forget that's how it works. Your brain, you have to let your brain wander to places that you're not steering it. Because the place you're steering it are the place you already know. You already kind of know where you're going. So that's not where the interesting stuff is. Just let it wander, and then it'll find you.
Okay. Nicest thing while making a video game. What is it?
I think the nicest thing for me is seeing something click. Like a lot of game development is iterative, which means that we don't actually know what we're doing. We just kind of go like, wouldn't it be cool if you could like double jump? But only if, what if you could jump again if you hit something, right? So if you hit an enemy, then you can jump again. There's an entire game that just came out based on that mechanic called The Messenger. And it's not It doesn't mean that the developer came up with that idea. It's just at some point, maybe a bug, maybe a problem, maybe a code issue, maybe it was an original idea. Nobody knows. But when you make a game, very often like little happy accidents happen. Yeah. And you kind of want to like home in on those. And then sometimes for months, you're just developing around it. And it's there, and it's good, but it doesn't click, right? It's not a part of the whole game. And I think in a good game, everything kind of clicks together. And in a lot of games, things only click in the last few months of development. And seeing your entire game come together with the graphics and the music and the sound effects and the special effects and the, you know, everything being there, and then the gameplay is good, and you just play through the level for the first time, and it's good. You know, it's like you're like, this is it. This was what. That's amazing. Like it's every time it happens to me, I'm just a big smile on my face, just because it's so much. There's so much that could go wrong making a game. Every game that ships is a miracle. That. It's beautiful. It's wonder. It's when I was a kid and dreaming of game development, I didn't know that was what I was dreaming about. But it's that moment where you're like, everything works.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nice. So only one game you can keep while others will vanish. Which one you choose?
All others will vanish.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. No pressure. Well, that would have to be a game that I can play over and over again.
Don't say Super Mario.
No, it won't be Super Mario. No, it will probably be something multiplayer, actually. You know what? This might sound, this is very selfish, but Destiny. I would keep Destiny. Because I would keep a game that is social, that is online, because I think one of the beautiful things about games is that they connect people. Yeah. I would keep a game that I personally like, obviously. And I would keep a game that would allow for a lot of growth in the future. So it's kind of stuck between like Minecraft or Fortnite or Destiny or something like that. I thought of FIFA for a moment as well, but we can just play soccer in real life. So, so Destiny, yeah, okay. something futuristic, hopeful, online, social, something that can connect the world, which I think that game can.
Okay, fine. P. Planning a new game. What's the most important part in that?
I think the most important part in planning a game is to realize that a lot of it can't be planned. Like I said, because a lot of it is iterative, a lot of them it is experimenting, is trying things out. Sometimes very simple things can take months, sometimes very complicated things are done in a day. You kind of have to give yourself space to experiment, and then when you get past that, when you get past the point of experimenting, you have like a good idea of what the game is going to be, then you can start planning. But for the R&D, for like the prototyping, you just have to make space, you just have to make time, you have to put no pressure on it, because it's never good that way. On the other end of development, when you're starting to finish a game, the biggest challenge is actually to know when you're done. Because the game is never perfect. It's never done. There's always something you want to fix, and there's this law of diminishing returns that you can put in the same amount of effort, but the longer you do that, the less valuable that effort becomes, because you're fixing smaller and smaller stuff. Figuring out when to say like, done. It's one of the hardest planning things. More than like planning up front, more than planning schedules or budgets, like being able to go like, okay, it's done. Okay, people go play it. It's really hard. It's really, really hard. Yeah. Okay. It's fun, but it's hard.
Okay. Q. Oh, yeah, but we nailed it. Nice. Q&A sessions. What's the most ridiculous questions you were asked during them?
I've ever asked, or I've ever been asked?
Been asked.
One of my favorite was a guy asked me where I got my hair done.
Oh.
Yeah, they were just like, well, who does your hair? And I'm like, well, I can give you the name of the place. It was kind of a cute question. I don't know, like it's one of those things where obviously being me and the talks I give, you kind of get like a specific type of question, like how do you make games? How are you creative? How do you finish your games? A lot of it is about game development, and I love that, right? It's part of why I do what I do, is I want to share knowledge about game development. I want to take knowledge from some place in the world and bring it to other places in the world. But sometimes getting a question just about, my hair, or like, you know, what where I buy my T-shirt, or like stuff like that. It can be it can be fun as well. It's a bit of both, right? And it was a pretty weird question. Yeah.
But maybe it wasn't a question. Maybe it was a compliment.
I think it was a little bit of both, or it was like a subtle dig, and they were just being like, "Wow, you need a new hairdresser." Like, I don't know. I never asked, but yeah, it was a fun question. It was just it came out of nowhere. I also had one question during a Q&A where somebody asked me something, and then I wanted to say something, and I did this like gesture of like pointing at them. The moment I pointed at them, like just thunder struck, like right outside the building, and the entire room was like, and even I was just standing there like, I'm not going to do that again. And that was a good moment as well. Nice. Q&A can be really fun.
Nice.
Yeah.
Okay. So, reactions to your games. What was the most memorable one?
Well, that's an easy one. When we released Super Crate Box, there was, which was our debut game, right? Yeah. It was this little high-score platformer game that you could keep playing, right? You could just try and get better. I got an email from a kid who was in hospital. He was very sick, and the treatment was just kind of like wrecking him. He was not doing very well, and he was in a lot of pain. And he said that the one thing that he would do to distract himself from how bad everything was and how much hurt he was in is he would play Super Crate Box. Oh. And it's that kind of stuff where you're just like, you know what? You know, people say like, "Oh, you're wasting your time on games," right? That's a lot of like people. A lot of people when I was growing up would say like, "You're wasting your life on games." Like, there's so much better things you can do. You could be a doctor. You could be an engineer. You could work in like space engineering. You could do all of this stuff. And I remember I asked my doctor once, because I had a really cool doctor when I was growing up, and I asked my doctor, and he said, "You know what? Health is very important, right? Like, being healthy is very important to people's happiness, but people's happiness is very important to their health. So if you make people happy, you're actually making them healthy. So I'll make sure that people are healthy. You make sure people are happy." And I've always believed that, but getting that email, that proved it to me. That, you know, making games is not just something. We make people's lives better by distracting them from how terrible life is in real life, by giving them worlds that they can be important in, by giving them experience that they could not have in real life, by training them, teaching them, showing them places, and sometimes just by being somewhere else to, you know, have a different life for a little, and that can be very powerful. And if happiness is health and health is happiness, then we're a big part of that. And yeah, it was yeah, that I will never forget that email.
But there's also I had one like okay, so should players of video games know more of how games are being created, or should they just stay the consumers?
I think being an informed consumer is very powerful. I think there's nothing wrong with just playing games, right? If you just want to play games and you want to know nothing about it, that's fine. I think knowing more about how games are made will actually improve your enjoyment of games. Not necessarily in the same way. Yeah. If you know nothing of games, they're kind of magical, right? If you know a little bit of tricks behind the magic, you can see the love and effort and passion. You can see the intricacies. You can kind of see a little behind the curtain. Not too much, right? But it's kind of how everybody knows how a book is written, right? It's some person sitting behind a typewriter or sitting behind a computer writing. And then not a lot of people know about like the editing process, about the back and forth, about like cutting chapters. Like, not a lot of people know that, but they know that inherently there's a writer. And we know the same about movies, that there's this guy on this person that's on this machine with the camera on it, like on the car, you know, in the back. And it makes you appreciate those shots of like a Jeep racing through a jungle. It makes you appreciate when you know that there was another Jeep in front of it racing along with this person in this harness with this camera. It makes the shot cooler. And I think I think as an industry, we've kind of failed to let people know that games are made by people. Yeah. And we've kind of made this reality where games are made by companies. And I hate that, because games are made by people, and I seeing those people and knowing how much they care about every tiny detail in a game, about every every light, every surface, every object, every line of VO, every piece of music, every sound effect, it's been checked and rechecked and done and redone 100 times. Pieces of script have moved. The writer changed stuff in the last minute and fixed there's so much that happens in making a game. And the way I love games is obviously different from somebody who knows nothing about how games are made. But I don't love them less. It's like a good magic trick. If you see a magic trick and you don't understand it, you know you're being tricked. Yeah. There's nobody sits there and goes like, wow, this person really made the card disappear. No, of course the card, there's a trick. You just don't know it. And you can love that. But knowing that this person had to do something doesn't make the trick worse. It just makes you curious as to how they did it. And if you know how the trick is done and it still fools you, that's real magic. Okay. And for me, I know how games are made. But when I play a game and I forget that, that's real magic. When a game can just transport me there, even though I know every trick, that you can do. There's no greater magic than fooling somebody who knows how the trick is done.
Yeah, okay.
So, know more about how games are made. There's magic to be found there.
And that's also a compliment to someone.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. T. The worst thing that can happen while making a game.
Well, the worst thing that can happen. The worst thing that can happen while making a game. Well, there's two things. Yeah. Either your team falls apart. That's really rough, and that happens sometimes because it's a creative process. There's a lot of people trying to work on the same thing, and sometimes it turns out that those people don't agree on certain things. And I've seen really good indie games fall apart because two people in the team ended up fighting, or one person in the team was being a jerk or inappropriate, or stuff like that can really affect a game. I think the other thing that's terrible is something from the outside, whether it's a computer getting stolen, or a backup getting lost, the building burning down, the building flooding. There's lots of stories like that. But also just like an external deadline getting moved up, like when the creative process gets disrupted by something from the outside, it's such a shame. And there's so many beautiful games that I love where I just know that part of development was really bad, either because of personal issues or because of external issues. And it can, at the end of a game, when you're done developing a game, as a developer you want to feel proud. And it's very rare that as a developer you actually like the game. It's a weird secret, but most developers, when they're done with a game, they're exhausted. They're tired. We've worked on it for 3 years. We see every mistake that we couldn't fix. We see every problem that we wanted to work on, but we couldn't, right? And then we just go like, okay, play it. Play it. Like, I hope nobody will notice. And it's so rough to see during development, while people are still working, to already see that kind of like cracking. And that's, I think that's the roughest thing that can happen during game development, is something from the outside breaking the creative flow. Under
pressure. So is it something how game developer feels most of the time under pressure?
Yeah, I think there's a balance. I think there's a big balance. I think in the last few years the pressure has definitely increased on developers, because besides being a developer, we need to be a good developer, a good artist, a good musician, a good writer, a good programmer. We have to program for multiple platforms, which means additional pressure. We have to market our games well, which means additional pressure. We have to pitch to publishers or do a Kickstarter, or like additional pressure. We're kind of expected to be kind of public figures. Some of us front-facing, like, I'm me on Twitter the same way I'm me in real life. Some people use a pseudonym or a different name. Some people, they're on Twitter, but they're not anywhere else, like Toby Fox. There's people who are kind of like quiet online, but they're a bit more outspoken in their games. Like, we're kind of expected to be all sorts of things at once. And that's, when I started, it was a lot simpler than that. You just released the game, and if it was good, it found an audience, because there weren't that many indie games. So I think the pressure definitely increased, and I think in a way that increases another pressure on independent developers, which is the pressure to just take care of yourself, to make sure that you know, this pressure doesn't get to you, because if you break, your game never gets made. My grandma always told me that she had 12 kids, right? 12 kids, it's a lot of kids. And she asked me, for who do you think I made breakfast first? And I would go like, well, the oldest ones because they had university. And she's like, no. And I'm like, well, the youngest ones because they had elementary school. She's like, no. I'm like, well, the middle ones then, because it's not the others. She's like, no. She's like, it's myself. Because if I don't eat breakfast, if I faint, none of the other people are getting breakfast. And you know what? She was right. Like, you have to take care of yourself first, because if you don't take care of yourself, you can't take care of others. If you can't take care of others, you also can't take care of a game. Like, a game is the only thing that can't take care of itself. You have to make it. So eat your own breakfast first, then take care of the game.
Okay, good advice. Thank you. So we're getting to the end. 6 or 5. V. Vacations. How many times per year a game developer can go on them, realistically?
Well, that's kind of one of the weird things, right? If you're working for a big company, you're just a salary job, and whatever the local laws are about holidays, that's what applies. In the US, that's a few weeks a year, maybe 1 or 2, a few weeks a year, and then you have some days off. If you're in Europe, I don't know how it is here, but in the Netherlands where I'm from, you have a lot more holidays. If you're an independent developer, it's kind of up to you. It's kind of one of the weird things. And you know what the weird thing is? You would think that if you could take vacation whenever you want, people go on a lot of vacations. But one of the biggest problems is independent developers don't go on vacation. They just keep working because they love what they do. So we have a rule at Vlambeer that whenever one of us feels like we need some time off, we can just take the time off. We just let the other person know and we go. And that might sound lazy, but in reality, that means we take maybe 2 weeks off a year, maybe 3 weeks. We've gotten a lot better at sort of like pacing ourselves and like making sure that we're in our best state when we're making games, because we think our games are better that way. But you take a lot of indie developers live in service of their game, so we take vacation when the game allows it, and the game is the boss, and that's not always healthy, and it's not always good. But I think a lot of developers are finding, especially nowadays with the increased pressure that you asked about earlier, a lot of developers are finding better balance, better ways of like dealing with that.
Okay. So W. But I know the answer to that already, but I'm gonna ask you anyway because alphabet. Would you become a game developer again if you could turn back time right now?
If I could turn back time right now, I would not change anything. I wouldn't talk to myself. I wouldn't warn me. I wouldn't give myself a tip. Everything I've ever done in my life, every mistake, every failure, every tough moment, every sad moment, everything that I could have warned myself for, in a way, I can see how it brought me here. When I finished high school, I wanted to study game development at a university, right? That was my dream. And something went wrong in the paperwork. So I couldn't study for a year. And my heart was like broken, right? Because I'd been working for this all my life. I'd been getting good grades. I've been like, putting effort into being the best student I could be so that I could pick game development at the end of it. And then he just said, no, because you filled out this form wrong, so you don't get to study for the entire year. So I had to find a job. And I couldn't find a job in the games industry because I had no formal experience. So I ended up selling computers just at a retail store, and I hated it. When I started it, I hated it. And then over the year, I actually really got to love that job. And I got to love like talking to people, figuring out what they need, learning how to negotiate with people. I had a really good boss that like really inspired me. And then when I got out of that year, I went to game design school, I actually kept the job. And when I started Vlambeer for the first 2 years, I still had that job. And then eventually when Vlambeer started doing really well, I eventually quit. But everything I know about negotiating, about finding out people's needs, about distilling what people want from, not always knowing what they want, like all of that comes from those years of, something that started with heartbreak. And in a way, a lot of things that we don't think of as good moments in our life end up with where you are right now. So I'm happy with where I am. I'm very thankful. I'm very grateful. I feel very privileged to do what I do. So I wouldn't change a thing.
Okay. Good. X. Okay. That's a tricky one.
Yeah, here we go.
But X button. What is the first thought about it when you hear X button?
My favorite thing about the X button is that it's on a different place on every console. And I don't know how that happened, but it's obviously on the Switch, it's in a different spot than it is on the PlayStation, on a different spot than it is on the Xbox controller. But despite that being like a weird reality of games, I think the X button to me is the indie button. Because a lot of indie games in 2010, the two buttons they would use were Z and X on the keyboard. X for action and Z for secondary action. And I don't know why that happened. I think it's like an old legacy thing from earlier consoles or from early computing. But yeah, Z and X were always the buttons that indie devs used. So for me, the X button just means that a game was an indie game, like in 2010. It's kind of weird, but that's how it is.
Okay. Yeah. So, the last two.
Yeah.
Why? Your thoughts about Lithuania in one sentence.
I've been really impressed, actually. It's not a country that I immediately think of when I think about, okay, what game development is happening. But being here at this conference and seeing Vilnius for like, you know, seeing the city a bit, getting to talk to some people, getting to talk to the developers here, it's a place of tremendous opportunity, and it's a place of tremendous growth, and you can kind of feel the excitement of a place that knows that there is opportunity, and it's a very good location. You have incredible internet. I don't know, like I go to like countries all around the world, and it's just there's not a lot of places that have this level of internet access. Like it's a place that it's in the right spot to do cool stuff, so I'm excited to see the cool stuff.
Okay. And the last one, Z. So, 0 players who brought your game. Is this the biggest nightmare of game developers?
0, yeah. Here's the thing: you make a game. One of the weird things about a game is that you can develop it, but if nobody's playing it, it's not a game. It's just a menu screen. Like somebody needs to press the button, and until you get that loop going between a player and a game, the game isn't real, right? It's just a ball on the ground or a screen doing nothing. So 0 players is the worst thing that can happen. 1 player, that's good. Because as soon as 1 player is playing it, you've got that loop going, and now it's real. But if nobody plays it, you might as well not have made it in a weird way. Like, yeah, sure, it's the practice of developing, it's like getting, but yeah, I think a lot of developers, if they got 0 sales, they'd just give it away for free. Honestly, because that's the point. The point is a player, and if that has to be free, then free. But yeah, I can't imagine making a thing that gets played by nobody. That would be very sad. I've not known a lot of developers that ever made a game that had 0 players, but yeah, it sounds really bad.
Okay.
I wouldn't like it.
Okay. So thank you very much, and achievement unlocked. Wow. The whole alphabet of questions.
And good questions in there as well. That was some tough stuff. Yeah, that was fun. Now I know how it feels the other way around. Instead of talking about every letter, getting asked every letter. Thanks so much.
Okay. So thank you.
Thank you.